You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered. And this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. It's Wednesday, ready to go. Glad to have you aboard. Look, again, being a lot of emails on the email line, go to DougCollinsPodcast.com, DougCollinsPodcast.com. You can get the email button link and send me your questions, comments on it. We've had a lot over the last little bit. Thank you for the positive support. The questions you have, please continue to go there. That's a great link for us to know the sort of the mood of the audience. Remember to share this podcast, to subscribe to it. Make sure you never miss a beat of the Doug Collins podcast. We're glad to have you with us. Again, been another packed week so far. I mean, politics at this point is just coming at us fast and furious. Yesterday evening, the vice presidential candidate for presidential candidate Harris was announced. It is Tim Walz out of Minnesota, Governor of Minnesota. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to sort of lay the groundwork for where the election's at right now. And I think this will be, let's take a deep breath, look at it from what's happened over the last month, take into account the two parties now pretty well set. We still got one more from my perspective, nauseating week of the Democratic convention coming up. The press have given them almost a month of what I would call Democrat convention worthy press. Now we're just going to see it come back even further. So as we look at this today, let's get together. Let's talk about it. And we're glad to have you here on the Doug Collins podcast right after the break. We'll be right back. You might have heard Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of the box stores or the shopping channels as the way they used to. They've been part of the cancel culture, so they want to pass the savings directly on to you by having a $25 extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just one product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products. Some of you may not even know about that. So to get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out the $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-pillow use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. There's 6-pack of towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels. You guessed it, just $25. And for the first time ever, the MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, just $25. All orders over $75 will see free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long, so go to MyPillow.com and use the promo code Collins, that's COLLINS, or call 800-986-3994 today. That's promo code Collins. Hey, inflation's at a 40-year high. The stock market looks more uncertain than ever. The new central bank digital currency is on its way and could be the government's ultimate surveillance tool against Americans. It looks like the government is playing games with your savings and retirement. So what are you going to do to help protect yourself? Did you know that you can have physical gold and silver into your IRA or 401k with zero tax or penalties? Millions of Americans are doing this right now for protection, and you should think about it too. A company I trust and recommend is Preserve Gold. They will go all over your options and make sure the process of acquiring precious metals is simple and easy. So if you're looking to help protect your retirement with a trustworthy company, request your free investment guide from the experts at Preserve Gold. Preserve Gold is accredited by the Better Business Bureau, and they have hundreds of 5-star reviews, so you know that you're in good hands. Just text Collins, COLLINS, to 50505. And an exclusive offer for my listeners, they'll get up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualifying purchase on a retirement account rollover. So don't wait. Text Collins to 50505 today and get your free gold and silver investment guide and take the first step. Again, text Collins to 50505 to get your free guide from the good people at Preserve Gold. Okay, as we look at this race and break this down, let's just go back. Let's take a step back and take a breath. And I really want to do this because this is something is really, I think, important for all of us. Think about where we are now. Let's take the table and set it as it is now. You have Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who have been together now for less than 3 weeks since the Republican convention in Minneapolis, and that team has been set immediately. attacked by the mainstream media because at the same time, if you remember, we're coming off of the other issue that we'll talk about, and that's the Biden overthrow. Now, since then, you've also had set the Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate is now Tim Walz. He is the current governor of Minnesota. He's a former member of Congress for a number of years. I served with Tim, know Tim to an extent. He has taken very much of a left-hand turn as governor of the state of Minnesota, but he's also a very liberal member while he was in Congress as well. So some of this is just not a surprise. Veteran, could become questions. I know there's some issues of what his final rank status is. That'll, again, sort itself out as we go through this. It's all in the early stages. But the very thing we do know, this is by far one of the most, if not the most liberal ideological ticket that we've ever seen in politics. There's just no way around it at this point. And I'm going to speak to that a little bit more as we get into the podcast, but I need to set the two. So now you have Trump, you have Vance, you have Harris, and you have Walz. That's your ticket. That's the tickets for November. We're now set. We're 90 days out. Democrats have their convention. But remember, this all started. The crazy part about this whole thing is this all started a little over a month ago. You got to put this in perspective. A little over a month ago when Donald Trump and Joe Biden met in Atlanta for a debate that was supposed to be the early debate to show that Joe Biden was up to this and everything was good, and completely came in and made a train wreck of the debate. Immediately, he was overthrown. Immediately, the sounding bell started. I thought for a while he was going to hold out. I believe that Democrats actually were lying about his condition to get him through the November election, thinking he could beat Donald Trump again, and then they would just deal with the fallout in a second term. If he couldn't go forward, if he could go forward, then you would have they could elevate Vice President Harris and during that time, and she would go into it as an incumbent in the next cycle. I don't, whatever their thinking may have been to hide this fact from the American people, which many of us had talked about before. We talked about on this podcast. You saw it all the time. You could see it in the stumbles, the gaffes, the off the cuff remarks. You could see it in the getting lost. They tried to cover it up, but it was getting worse and worse. And the debate just opened the floodgates of everybody seeing that Joe Biden was not capable of handling a campaign, much less, as many argue, if he can't handle the campaign, can he actually handle being president of the United States? I think that's still a debatable topic as we look at it. But either way, this has been less than roughly 5 weeks, 6 weeks since that happened. Then we had a 2-week period in which everybody was saying, is he going to stay? Is he not going to stay? Is he going to get out? Is he going to drop out? Whatever it's going to be. And then he decided on a Sunday afternoon that he was dropping out. He endorsed Harris. Harris then quickly consolidated all the media support. She quickly consolidated all the ones that, really were not going to challenge. I mean, this was sort of a setup. I mean, to think about somebody trying to mount a challenge against a sitting vice president who had the media and everybody within, minutes almost of Biden dropping out and endorsing her, follow in line and say that it's going to be Vice President Harris as our presidential nominee. There's a virtual nominating convention that has been held and it's finalized, and that they, even before they get to their convention, that they knew that this was going to be their candidate. So all this happened very quickly. No vetting, no votes. Again, this is the first time in this kind of an environment in which you have a sitting presidential nominee who never received a vote in the primary process. Now, there's been times when you've had a president become president through the vice presidency and never had, maybe got a vote for president, but they've been through an election part of this to gain the nomination. This is just not true in this case. So as you look at this, this was a very much of a quick rehearsal for Vice President Harris. She's still, to this day, I think we're up to almost 19 days or 20 days since she officially basically became the nominee, that she has not sat down for an interview. The one time that she went off of teleprompter was a disaster. It was on the tarmac when the hostages came, that they basically traded for hostage to bring back the Wall Street Journal reporter and others, and give a killer back to the Russia during this time. But it was a train wreck. The answer was awful. So they've kept her behind the podium. They've kept her behind the teleprompter. I've said this before, and I believe it to be true. The teleprompter for Kamala Harris is almost like my glasses. It's her aid. It's how she gets through speeches. It's how she puts together the thoughts in a coherent manner that she just undoubtedly for the last little bit has not been able to do off the cuff. And we see this happen all the time. But so if she's behind a teleprompter, she can pull off a relatively seamless speech. She's gotten very good at just reading what others have written. She does not riff. She does not go off teleprompter. And she just goes straight to the script and occasionally may throw in a line or two, but very rarely will go off script. That is how they're looking to manage this campaign. It's amazing to me now that you've gotten the vice presidential pick out of the way, that now they're going across country doing these swing state tours, that she's still not sat down for an interview. That's going to be an interesting time. Are they going to hide her basically through the convention and let it happen after the convention? Yeah, that may be the thought here. And the press has given her a pass at it at this point. The question will be is how long will the press give a pass? Even the liberal media is questioning the lack of accessibility to this candidate. So we'll see if she is able to do the basement campaign of Biden in 2020, or will she just stick to the scripted events in which she doesn't have to speak off the cuff and leave that to Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who is fairly adept at being speaking off the cuff to reporters, having a repartee with them. He is the one that came up with the weird comment about that they're just weird, talking about Republican nominee J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and Republicans in general. He will probably be their attack dog. We saw that yesterday in his acceptance speech. I mean, in which he basically alluded to a very false and malicious claim about J.D. Vance in his acceptance speech. So, look, we got a lot going on here, a lot of things that are going to be building, but I'm just going to now bring it back to the simple fact that I will say that, yes, Harris being younger and being not Joe Biden has reinvigorated some of the Democrat base. When it came to picking a vice presidential candidate, we've not really dove into this, so let's do this for a second. She looked wide and away and picked, people from the cabinet and others who to be vetted for a vice presidential nod. But it had to be, I think, coming down to the end, that what most thought, and again, politicos, people who do politics for a living, had all sort of settled around a Josh Shapiro vice presidency. And I think, frankly, if you look at some of the Josh Shapiro folks and some of the others, this was the ascension that was going to happen. Josh Shapiro was going to be named the vice presidential pick. But something went awry on the way to the courting process. And I think probably a little bit of both. I think history will sort of shine a light saying there was a little bit of concern from Shapiro saying, I've got a very good position that I'm in right now. I'm a rising star. If something were to happen and Trump wins, which I believe will happen, I can stay as the governor and then in 2028 be ready to run on my own for president and not have to play second fiddle to anybody. But then there was the bigger problem, and that is that he, frankly, being Jewish, and with all the issues with Iran and Israel and Hezbollah and Hamas and all, there is a solid block of the pro-Hamas Democratic Party that would just absolutely refuse to accept a Shapiro vice presidency, even though Harris is completely with them, sold out, in many ways to their ideological view on these issues with Israel. There was no way that she could have appeared to be enough cover to bring Shapiro into the fold. And also there was some concerns, and this was, reported, again, you take that with a grain of salt, that Fetterman and others in Pennsylvania were worried about his ambition. Would they outshine the presidential nominee, which is Harris? That's always a concern. You never want the vice presidential candidate to be the more talkative, the more outspoken, the more eloquent the draw on the ticket, it needs to reflect back to the top of the ticket. At the end of the day, Shapiro was not picked. There's been some conversation that he was not sure he wanted it after going through the vetting. So again, that'll be left for reporters and folks who are looking for Pulitzers to decide if they can get the inside scoop on what happened there. But then it left you with another pick that came out, Mark Kelly out of Arizona, who is not the big gap on Mark Kelly was, senator from Arizona, was he's just not dynamic. He was not a dynamic speaker. He doesn't speak, he just does not fire at people. He has some views on immigration that, again, goes against this open border policy of Vice President Harris and the Biden administration. And that would be a different tack. Most of your regular politicos would have said this is a good thing because it gives balance to the attacks on Vice President Harris about her open border acceptance and border czar stuff. Again, not enough, didn't pick him. At the end of the day, it came home, I believe, to the ideological issue that I said earlier in this podcast is the most liberal ideological ticket to ever run on the Democratic side, by far. And you look at it, is that Harris was comfortable with Walz because he ideologically fit. And he is not a overly ambitious. In fact, if most people in the Democratic Party, and especially the Republican Party, probably a few weeks ago, if you'd have said Tim Walz, they would have not known who he was. 70+%, there was a quick flash poll, 70, 80% of Americans did not know who he was. So now there's the vetting going on. This will be interesting because a lot of people said the same thing about J.D. Vance, and the press aggravated the situation of J.D. Vance by bringing out every comment, everything I think they've been holding, that they've been wanting to use against Vance. They held it to after he was named the party's nominee. Walz has the same issue now. Now you're going to find out who Tim Walz is. You're going to find out all the bills that he sponsored, doing away with internal combustion engines, selling out to the Green New Deal. As governor, his signed a bill that basically allowed children who were born alive from an abortion or others to not receive medical care. Hear me clearly. What they agreed to do was allow a child born through a botched abortion, if you would, or other, that they would just let them die on the table. This is how extreme. I've said this before with Republicans. You go to my social media at Rep. Doug Collins on Twitter and others, and I talked about this before. The Democrats' position on this issue is not moderated at all. They're the extremists. They will go all the way to birth 40 weeks plus and find no reason to step in to intervene to save the life of an unborn. This is who Tim Walz is. He signed the bill. He made the earliest restrictions and made it a fundamental right to have an abortion in Minnesota. He also went into the social wars even more in the transgender issues, making it much easier and by law that you basically can't stop you must offer the transgender reassignment surgery to children, young children. He is also one that put feminine products into male bathrooms, transgender athletes, women, men competing in women's sports. The list goes on and on and on. He was a former school teacher. He's in with the labor unions. I mean, this is, again, from a base perspective, this was the perfect base pick. Now it's got to go into places like Georgia. And I'm not sure why the media has all of a sudden said Georgia is in play because of Tim Walz. I just don't see that. Harris is not popular in Georgia. Walz will be less popular in Georgia, I believe, than Harris. Walz will be less popular than Harris will be once his record is defined. And that's what's happening right now. The Trump campaign has got to define Walz before the Democrats can define Walz. If they can do that as a very much of a person who is against most of the majority of the American people's values when it comes to the issues that I've just mentioned, whether it be men and women's sports, transgender surgeries, without parental issues here. If it goes into, the fact that he stood by when Minneapolis was burning to the ground and did nothing, a former National Guard member who did nothing while Minneapolis burned after the George Floyd riots. The famous pictures coming out. This is a mostly peaceful riot when you have buildings burning in the background. I mean, this is the Tim Walz that the American people need to find out now who he is before there's a sterilized version of who Tim Walz as this, rural Midwesterner, folksy kind of guy that almost everybody uses the same terminology now. No, he is a very much liberal who is committed to changing the very fabric of our country. He is also committed in climate change. He's also, looking at the things that are inherently different than in most of what we'll call the battleground states as we go forward. So look, I think this race is tighter. We've talked about this on the podcast. Chip and I talked about it last week on Friday's Finest. I'm sure we'll get into it again this week on Friday's Finest. But the real issue here is, will the Republican Party come together, focus on the things that got us to the point we are now: immigration, economy, this issue with Iran and Israel, the support of Israel, the issue of lying about, Vice President Harris has lied to the American people for over, at least a year on the condition of Joe Biden. This was a consolidated cover up by the White House, away from the media, away from the other branches of government, to not know about how mentally incapacitated he was becoming. I think these are all issues that now will be defined. Look, we've still got, from a Republican perspective, all I'll say is hold on. Just hang on for another couple of weeks. Okay? We got to get through next week with the next 2 weeks with Vice President Harris's pick of Walz. Then you got the tours next week. Everybody's vetting each other. And then you go straight into the Democratic Party National Convention the week after. So, again, just be patient. This is where it's coming. You're going to hear it, but then conservatives keep messaging. Do not get off of social media. Do not get off of telling your friends. Do not quit knocking on doors. Do not quit making phone calls. We've got to make sure, because here's something to warn most of you, is in some of your states, it's by early September and mid-September, absentee ballots will be going out. And by that point in time, people will be actually casting votes. And we need to make sure that our people, no matter how you want to vote, early in person, early absentee, if your state allows it, or if you're all mail in, or voting day of, whatever it is, make sure that you get your vote counted. We've got to make sure that the Republicans are turning out, and we cannot let anything distract us from that. So from a perspective of looking ahead, that's the setting of the ticket. The ticket is now set. It's Trump, Vance, Harris, Walz. It's now time for us to get busy and make sure that the conservative movement is out there singing the same discussion that we have that was working against Joe Biden. It still works against Harris, who owned every bit of the Biden administration. We've got to make sure that happens. So that's it. We'll see you on Friday with Friday's Finest with Chip and James. Looking forward to a great discussion more as we go forward. Again, go back to the DougCollinsPodcast.com. You can go to my email, hit that email button. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, go out and have a great day.